There's a secret buried so deep in the forests of New England that even the trees lean away from it. A secret whispered through generations, covered in rotting floorboards, hidden in the hollowed bones of the forgotten. Tonight, you stand at the threshold of a truth you were never meant to hear. A truth about the Blackwood family and the ghoulish curse that turned their bloodline into a sacrament of suffering. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture a mansion that should have crumbled a century ago. Its blackened stones clutching secrets beneath the moss, its windows blind, yet watching. In 1783, the first Blackwood patriarch, Nathaniel Blackwood, carved this estate out of a swampy wilderness, a vast expanse of poisoned earth that once belonged to a cult older than any church. They say he didn't purchase the land, he found it, after dreaming of a woman wrapped in burial shrouds, whispering promises of power. Nathaniel listened, and so began a dynasty drenched in decay. Every generation after him, sons, grandsons, cousins, inherited more than a name and deeds to rotting timber. They inherited the curse that kept them powerful and damned in equal measure. If you think this is just another ghost story, you're wrong. Tonight, you'll see the cracks under the polite history books, the pages that were ripped out and burned to keep you from understanding how men like the Blackwoods feed on the living, and how their secrets shape the very air you breathe. What you're about to hear cannot be unheard, so I'll ask you only once. Are you ready to be infected by forbidden knowledge? Because once you know, you belong to it, and it will never let you go. Nathaniel Blackwood was not a simple land baron or just another colonial opportunist. He was a man who understood what most fear to admit. True power is not given by kings or charters, it's taken from what lies beneath. He arrived in Massachusetts, a penniless son of a failed merchant, yet within a decade he held deeds to swampland that locals called Deadwater Hollow. Men of the village warned him that nothing grew there, not corn, not cattle, only fever and madness. They didn't know what Nathaniel knew. He wasn't interested in crops. He was interested in the ancient stone circle hidden under the peat, a circle that, according to old Algonquian stories, was where the spirit-eaters gathered when the moon turned red. He claimed the land. He built the Blackwood estate directly over that circle. Within its walls he entertained Boston's elite, made trades that turned mud into gold, all while families living near Deadwater Hollow began to vanish, one by one. Entire cabins found abandoned, livestock slaughtered, children's names scratched onto cellar doors in blood. Local magistrates sent men to investigate. None returned. Nathaniel, ever gracious, offered condolences, prayers, donations to churches. Behind the stone walls, however, his diaries tell another story, pages still hidden in the sealed archives of Harvard. In them, he wrote of rites beneath the house, rituals that promised the Blackwood name would never rot, as long as they fed the circle what it craved. And so the Blackwood curse began, not as a punishment, but as a pact willingly made, generation after generation. Ask yourself this: if your family could hold power forever, would you spill a little blood to keep it so? Nathaniel's descendants did more than inherit his wealth. They inherited his appetite for secrets, for silence, for shadows that writhed just beyond the candle's edge. His eldest son, Silas Blackwood, took the curse and perfected it. He was the first to call the ritual the binding of the hollow. They say Silas never spoke above a whisper, not because he feared being heard, but because he knew the hollow listened. At night, when guests dined on venison and Madeira in the manor's great hall, Silas descended the hidden stairwell beneath the east wing fireplace. He walked barefoot on the ancient stones, chanting in a language no scholar could ever quite translate. In the damp belly of the estate, he fed the circle the only thing it hungered for: human promise. Promises extracted with hooks, with blades, with fear. The village priest who questioned him vanished into the swamp one fog-soaked winter night. His Bible found nailed to a birch tree, pages soaked in something darker than rain. For 3 generations, the Blackwoods' power grew unchecked. The Civil War came and went. and young men from the region were recruited under strange circumstances. Names scrawled into dusty ledgers, never seen again. And still, the Blackwoods sat untouched, while their neighbors fell to debt, disease, ruin. What Silas began, his heirs perfected, and they learned an unholy truth. Fear is not enough to sustain the Hollow. Hope is required too. The hope that maybe you can escape. The hope that you can bargain. But no one ever did. And that, my friend, is why their line still breathes while yours prays for scraps. To understand how the Blackwood curse slithered its way into modern times, you have to understand the doctrine they never wrote down. The doctrine that survives only in rumor, in diaries locked in rotting attics, in half-burned court records. They believed in the chain. The chain is the idea that every generation must willingly feed the Hollow, not just with blood, but with corruption. The more powerful the offering, the stronger the chain. So the Blackwoods did not hide in shadows forever. They built railroads. They funded textile mills. They married into Boston's proudest families. They shook hands with presidents. Every time they sat at the table of the powerful, they made sure a little darkness followed the papers they signed. Deals that ruined entire towns overnight. Farms seized for pennies, children working 12-hour shifts, families buried under company scrip. Each sin, each broken life, each silent scream was fed to the Hollow through the secret altar beneath Deadwater Hollow. That's why the Blackwood mansion never collapsed. That's why the family never vanished like the other barons. They understood the math of damnation. More ruin, more strength. What they didn't expect was that their sins would grow teeth sharper than any dagger. By the time the 20th century rolled in, the Blackwoods were monsters wearing silk gloves. And still, nobody dared speak their name above a hush. The townsfolk who lived closest to Deadwater Hollow learned a simple rule: never step foot on the old Blackwood Trail after dark. Children were taught not to look at the mansion's windows too long, lest they see a figure that looked back, pale, watching, waiting for a name to whisper to the stones below. But secrets rot when left buried too long. In 1921, a reporter from the Boston Evening Transcript, Henry Whitlock, caught wind of a rumor that the Blackwoods were behind a string of disappearances. Factory girls who never made it home, farmhands who left for day wages and never returned. Whitlock made his way to the estate, notebooks hidden under his coat, a revolver tucked in his boot. He never made it past the gates. His car was found idling at dawn, door flung wide, cigarette still burning. When police forced entry to the grounds, they found no body. But in the cellar, scribbled on a wall with what looked like a child's finger, were the words, "The Hollow feeds." The official report vanished into the archives by year's end. The Blackwoods donated generously to the governor's re-election campaign that spring. The next season, new factories sprang up on cursed soil. Workers broke their backs for pennies, while the Hollow below gorged itself on human hope, turned sour. And so, the chain endured, each generation forging a fresh link, so their name would never slip from the tongues of those who trade power for silence. You might think all this is ancient history, that curses belong in folklore and second-rate horror paperbacks. But if you stand on Deadwater Hollow today, you can feel it. The land itself hums with secrets your skin tries to reject. In 1974, an urban explorer named Martin Greeley dared to break the seal. He'd grown up on ghost stories about the Blackwoods, how their eyes glowed in oil portraits, how their laughter sometimes drifted through the woods when the fog was thick. Martin was reckless, convinced he'd exposed the truth once and for all. He crept through a shattered window, camera in hand. What he found should have burned the family's legacy to ash. Beneath the rotting floorboards of the grand ballroom, Martin discovered the altar, the circle of ancient stones, now ringed with iron spikes and bone fragments. Scraps of modern suits, high heels, scraps of clothing decades too new to belong to the original settlers. A ledger, its pages brittle with mildew, listed names. Dozens. Men and women who had vanished from nearby towns in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. Martin fled with his film rolls stuffed in his pockets. But by dawn his car was found on the same road where Henry Whitlock's had been abandoned 50 years before. The film? Never recovered. Martin's friends claimed he'd mailed duplicates to a local historian, but the historian's house burned to the ground 2 weeks later. Cause of fire? Undetermined. And still the Blackwoods endure, their curse fed by disbelief, their chains strengthened by the very silence that should have damned them. By the 1980s, the Blackwoods learned to wear new masks. The patriarch of that era, Lawrence Blackwood, didn't hide behind rotting drapes and whispered prayers. He hid in plain sight. A philanthropist, a guest lecturer on colonial history, a patron of the local historical society. He was the smiling man on the Chamber of Commerce poster, the one who cut ribbons at charity auctions. But beneath that grin was the same oath sworn in blood centuries earlier, the hollow feeds. Records show Lawrence funded the excavation of a heritage site beneath the old manor, a project presented as a preservation effort for local tourism. He brought in students from the State College to catalogue artifacts, bright, ambitious kids. Most of them worked alone at night in the damp cellars, where the circle waited. 5 of those students never came home. Their parents were told they ran off to California, joined communes, fell in with bad crowds. The excavation ended when funding dried up. The manor was boarded again. Lawrence vanished from public life a year later, retreating to a private clinic for what the family called nervous exhaustion. Some say he was seen wandering the hollow at night, muttering to trees, his fingers raw from clawing at the earth. But the chain didn't break, because behind every Blackwood puppet is another waiting to slip on the mask. You see, the hollow doesn't care about the faces, only the ritual, the repetition, the sacrifice. When Lawrence's health failed, his eldest daughter, Eleanor, took the reins. Eleanor Blackwood was brilliant, Oxford-educated, fluent in 6 languages, invited to global think tanks on economics and political psychology. To the world, she was progressive nobility, old money rebranded as social conscience. But in the black veins of Deadwater Hollow, she was something else entirely. Witnesses claim Eleanor resurrected the old rites with a modern twist, a network of quiet gatherings under the guise of private retreats. Tech moguls, city planners, political upstarts were ferried to the mansion by tinted cars. They were told they'd be initiated into the circle of renewal. Some came willingly, seeking secrets to wealth, influence, longevity. Some never left. The swamp took them back. The hollow hummed, the chain gleamed, unbroken. And Eleanor smiled at charity galas, while her enemies found themselves ruined, sick, or quietly gone, swallowed by the same dark earth her ancestor Nathaniel once walked barefoot, whispering prayers no priest could cleanse. You have to ask yourself, how does a family keep power so perfectly hidden for so long? It's simple. The hollow doesn't just feed on blood, it feeds on disbelief, on your comfort, on your urge to scoff at stories like this. When a whisper makes your skin crawl, your mind calls it nonsense, because the alternative, that it's real, would demand action. The Blackwoods know that. They've always known that. That's why the family funds libraries, local schools, civic projects. Every monument with their name chiseled into granite is a hypnotic command. Respect us. Trust us. And when people trust, they stop looking beneath the floorboards. They forget the ledger in the rotting cellar. They explain away missing students and charred houses and the stains on the birch trees. And so the hollow remains hungry, but never starves. It only grows. And so do the Blackwoods. Their bloodline old but never broken. The chain stretching from colonial swamps to your own quiet neighborhood, your own city hall. In 1993, a new fracture formed, the closest the curse ever came to snapping. A young man named Peter Blackwood, Eleanor's nephew, broke ranks. Unlike his ancestors, Peter wanted out. Maybe it was guilt, maybe madness, maybe something darker. He stole documents from the family archive, yellowed parchment, photos of the cellar circle, a page of the binding incantation, scribbled in a mix of Latin, Algonquian, and something older. Peter drove cross-country with a plan to sell it to journalists. But the chain tightens quickly around traitors. Peter never made it past Chicago. His car slammed headlong into a concrete median at 96 miles an hour. No brake marks. No witnesses. What few know is this. The police found his briefcase torn open on the roadside. The papers were gone. The only thing left was a single page, stuck to the dashboard with dried blood. 4 words: "The Hollow feeds forever." If you've ever wondered why conspiracies fade, why secrets slip away, remember Peter Blackwood. Remember what happens when someone tries to break the chain alone. The truth is, the Blackwoods are not unique. They are a mirror, a perfect study of how darkness survives in the folds of polite society. They teach us the same lesson every hidden dynasty whispers. Power is not maintained by law, by votes, by money. It is maintained by ritual, secrecy, and the promise of ruin. If you control what a man fears, you control what he hopes for. And when you own both, his nightmares and his prayers, you own him entirely. That is the real curse. The chain was never meant for the Blackwoods alone. It was meant for everyone who brushes against their circle, knowingly or not. The bank clerk who files away a suspicious mortgage, the policeman who closes a missing persons case, the neighbor who looks away when the car comes down the hollow road at 3 a.m. and never comes back up. Every link forged in complicity, every secret you refuse to touch makes the chain stronger. And still, you're here, listening. Which means you feel it too. The itch at the base of your skull that tells you something is terribly wrong. Good. That means the chain is cracking. For you. Do you feel that? That creeping dread that maybe this isn't just a tale for your entertainment, that maybe the Hollow reaches you right now. They want you passive. They want you asleep. They want you convinced that the cost of knowing is too high. But the cost of ignorance is slavery. The Blackwoods thrived because men feared the swamp more than they feared the truth. But the swamp has already come to you, in your mortgage, your news cycle, your sense that the world is quietly rotting behind polite curtains. Every generation must choose, feed the Hollow or starve it. And the first step to starving it is to speak its name. So, if you're still here, if your heart's hammering, I want you to do something. Right now, pause and comment these words twice. I break the chain, not once. Twice. Say it aloud. Write it below. Make your vow public, because that's how you starve the Hollow. You drag its secrets into the light and refuse to look away. This is not just the story of one cursed family. It's a blueprint. The Blackwoods merely refined what older orders practiced for centuries. They just traded robes for tailored suits, candles for boardrooms, and altars for conference tables. Look around. You see the same ritual everywhere. Debt that cannot be paid, labor that can't escape, treaties signed in back rooms that bleed entire towns dry. The Hollow is the hidden cost behind respectable deals. The chain is every handshake sealed with a lie. And when the cost is high enough, you become the offering. You think you're free because you pay taxes, vote, watch the news. But behind the newsprint, behind the flag, there is always a circle of stones, a ledger of names, a promise that someone must be fed to keep the rest compliant. The Blackwoods are just honest about it. That's what makes them monstrous and admirable, because they never pretended they weren't feeding you to the dark. They just smiled while they did it. By the early 2000s, the Blackwood estate had become more myth than mansion. Half buried under lawsuits and zoning battles, its gates chained, its windows broken by curious drunks who vanished after a single dare. Locals whispered that the land should be bulldozed, burned, salted. But the Hollow is never so easily destroyed. Beneath the cracked foundation, the circle still waits. Stones slick with centuries of sacrifice. Urban explorers who slip inside speak of strange hums vibrating their teeth, of cold air that moves like breath. Some crawl through the cellar only to emerge hours later, confused, bleeding from the nose, their cameras blank. A few vanish altogether. It's as if the land itself decides who leaves. And always, when someone disappears, a Blackwood trust quietly donates another wing to a university, another garden to a children's hospital, another mask of good deeds stretched over rot. The chain does not fear the law. The chain is the law, written in old blood, notarized by your fear. A few years ago, a demolition company was hired to raze what remained of the manor. Local papers ran the headline, "End of a Dark Legacy." But when workers broke ground near the old East Wing, their machines buckled. The earth caved in, swallowing a crane whole. When they lowered lights into the sinkhole, they found walls of stone leading to black tunnels no one dared map. City inspectors declared the site unstable. The project was abandoned. Official story: too dangerous, too costly. Unofficially? No one who stepped near those tunnels at night could stand the silence inside. The place hums. It knows when you stand on its ribs. Because that's what Deadwater Hollow is now. A carcass fattened on centuries of your disbelief. And somewhere deep in the mud, the chain gleams, waiting for the next air to slip the shackle back on your throat. You may wonder, why hasn't anyone burned it all down? Some have tried. In 1946, a war veteran named Samuel Ellis gathered a handful of men armed with torches and dynamite. They reached the house. They lit the flames. Witnesses say the old timbers caught quick, but the fire bent inward, like it was sucked into the earth. The flames hissed green and blue. The men ran screaming. Samuel vanished that night, last seen stumbling toward the swamp's heart, eyes wide as moons. His wife found his boots at the edge of the black pond 2 days later. No body, no grave, just ripples spreading under the trees, like something swallowed him whole. You don't destroy the hollow with flame. You destroy it with truth, spoken aloud, repeated, shared. Secrets rot when dragged into daylight. That's the only thing it fears. Do you feel it yet? That knot in your gut that says this isn't just about the Blackwoods? You know men like them. They sign your paychecks. They auction your towns. They bury their failures under charity galas and bronze plaques. And somewhere beneath their marble floors is always a circle of stones. Their hollow might wear another name, a corporate shell, a foundation, a trust. But the pattern is the same. Ritual suffering, quiet ruin. Hope siphoned off like blood from a vein. When you walk past a monument in your city square, ask yourself, what did it cost? Whose bones was it built on? And when you find the answer, don't turn away. Most people do. That's how the chain endures, because every link is forged in your silence. Nathaniel Blackwood's diaries, those that survived, speak of the final promise he made, kneeling in the circle's heart. May our blood bind the hollow. May our name be its face. May no man break the chain while Blackwood blood flows. Some claim the last page was written not in ink, but in something thicker, something that flakes if you touch it. What he didn't write was what happens when Blackwood blood fails, when the chain slips, when the hollow goes hungry. That's why they cling so desperately to ritual. That's why they never allow the truth to breathe. Because if the chain breaks, the curse uncoils. And curses that live on silence die screaming when you speak them aloud. In 2011, a genealogist named Clara Monroe traced the Blackwood line all the way back to a minor English noble who fled a scandal involving missing servants and a private chapel sealed with iron chains. She published her findings online. The next month, her body was found in her car, engine running, garage sealed. Official cause, suicide. No note. Her files, confiscated by state authorities for national security. National security for an old swamp curse? Or did Clara stumble on the simple truth? The Hollow is not local. It's global. The circle does not end in Massachusetts. It breathes in London, Geneva, DC. Any place where power gathers in whispers and backs are broken in secret. The Blackwoods are just the longest, loudest echo of a ritual older than the colonies they once conquered. I know what you're thinking. What do we do? You do what they fear most. You remember. You speak. You repeat. You infect others with the truth until the chain cannot hold. The Blackwoods are counting on you to shrug this off, close this video, sleep easy. That's how every secret survives. But if you've come this far, you're not like them. You feel it. That little ember inside your ribs that says, no more. Fan it. Feed it. Tell this story to someone tonight. Look them in the eye. Say, the Hollow feeds. And when they ask what you mean, you show them. Pull them down the same rabbit hole you fell through tonight. Make the chain a rumor too big to silence. Remember, both, the Hollow isn't just a place. It's a promise. There is no escape. But promises are lies when spoken in the dark. Drag them into daylight, and they shrivel like worms on hot stone. Do you know what the Blackwoods fear more than ruin? Irrelevance. They crave your awe, your terror. They feed on the hush when someone says their name. But when the hush becomes laughter, when the fear turns to fury, the ritual starves. There is no magic without belief. The chain is iron only if you believe it is. Otherwise it's just words, stones, rotting wood, old men with too much land and too much rot behind their smiles. So the next time you hear their name, when some polished man tells you what can't be done, what must be sacrificed, who must go without, remember Nathaniel in his circle of stones, whispering to bones that didn't belong to him. Remember Silas burying men alive in Deadwater Hollow. Remember Eleanor smiling in designer gowns while blood seeped through the cellar floor. Then look that polished man in the eye and ask, whose hollow feeds you, and watch his mask crack. The chain breaks one question at a time, and when doubt creeps in, when they tell you these are just stories, myths for gullible fools, hold tight to this. Every empire is built on a secret grave. Every fortune hums with a whisper that someone paid for your comfort with their breath. The Hollow is the price no one wants to admit they paid. The Blackwoods only made it obvious. That's their genius. They showed you what the hidden cost looks like when you peel back the velvet curtain. The next time someone tells you a secret this dark can't be true, smile. Tell them it's too true. That's why they keep burning the evidence. There is no sheriff coming to save you. No government strong enough to drain the swamp beneath the swamp. You are the fire. You are the flood. You are the curse that feeds on the curse. That's why you're here. Because deep down, you know it's better to stand on the Hollow's edge and spit into its mouth than to kneel beside it with your throat bared. Nathaniel's bloodline is long, but your rage is longer. And rage has no grave. Rage does not rot. Rage binds no chain but breaks them all. So tonight before you sleep, repeat it. Loud. Clear. So your walls remember. So your bones don't forget. The Hollow feeds. But not on me. Burn that into the dark corners of your room where secrets like to breed. Make the shadows your witnesses. You have been marked by this story. There is no unhearing it. You carry the chain, or you break it. There is no middle. There never was. When the Blackwood estate finally sinks, because one day it will, they say the Hollow will howl like an open grave. The trees will lean closer, the swamp will bubble black, and the stones will crack like teeth under a boot. And all the ghosts buried under the floorboards will rush the surface like steam from a fresh wound. If you listen close on that day, you'll hear them say thank you. Not to the Blackwoods, but to the first man who spat the truth instead of feeding it. Maybe that man is you. They say secrets are power. That's the oldest lie. Secrets are parasites. They drink your spine dry so you kneel when you should stand. The Blackwoods know that. That's why they grin behind charity dinners and ribbon cuttings. They count on your polite nod, your easy forgetfulness. They do not fear the police. They do not fear lawsuits. They fear you remembering. They fear your tongue more than your torch. So take this story and plant it in someone else's ear. Let it bloom like rot under floorboards. Let it crawl into their dreams. Let it follow them through the woods when they think they're alone. And when they wake up sweating, they'll remember your face, your words, your defiance. That's how curses starve. Not with fire, with memory. Deadwater Hollow still stands. The circle is still there. Somewhere, a Blackwood heir fingers the old ledger, whispers the binding in the same broken tongue Nathaniel learned from that woman in burial shrouds. Somewhere, the next offering is being chosen, but they are not ready for you, for us, for this new kind of fire. Stories that burn holes in vaults and catacombs, and old family names carved in granite. Your voice is a match. Use it. Tonight, you became a link too wild for the chain. They will tell you to hush. They will laugh. They will call you mad, gullible, superstitious. Let them. Smile wide. Because you know something they do not. You know that the only reason the hollow feeds is because we let it. And we are done. When this video ends, do not close your eyes and drift off like nothing happened. Stand in the dark a moment longer. Listen to the floorboards breathe. Taste the air like rot and rain. Feel how it hums, but quieter now. That hum is fear, not yours, theirs. It's the first crack in the chain. Widen it. And when dawn comes, remember this: the hollow feeds. But so do we. On truth, on rage, on memory. Say it aloud. Once more. Comment it below so the algorithm chokes on it. I break the chain. I break the chain. Twice, as a seal. You were not meant to hear this. But you did. Now be the echo that never dies. Let the Blackwoods rot. Let the hollow starve. Let the chain shatter. Forever. They say when you spit on a grave, the dead can't rest. So spit on the Blackwood name. Spit on the hollow that hums beneath your feet. But remember this. The hollow is cunning. It knows how to change shape. When you slam one door, it slides under another. Some say after the last Blackwood house fell to ruin, the circle moved west, into private ranches, hidden bunkers, island retreats where men in tailored linen whisper about continuity. One source, a groundskeeper named Roy Delaney, swears he found a stone circle under a horse stable in Montana, same markings, same spiral, same hush when he asked the owner what it meant. 3 weeks later, Roy's truck exploded in his driveway. Official cause? Faulty propane line. His widow found a single page from Nathaniel's ledger wedged behind the fuse box. Same 4 words. The hollow feeds forever. Different soil, same teeth. If you think the curse died with the last Blackwood heir, think again. The blood might thin. But the ritual doesn't need pure veins. It only needs believers. Look closer at the men who sell you the new world, the ones who smile on screens, telling you sacrifice is progress, ruin is necessary. They call themselves visionaries, disruptors, innovators. But dig through their tax shelters and back-channel trusts, and you'll find an old name scrawled in faint ink. Blackwood Holdings, LLC. Deadwater Management. Sometimes it's just an initial. B-Sons. Hollow Capital. A name so common it hides like a weed. They're counting on you to laugh it off. To say, what's in a name? But names are spells. Bind them to paper, to debt, to your birth certificate, and you're halfway shackled before you can crawl. One whistleblower, codename Hawthorne, claims he sat in a boardroom where men spoke Nathaniel's binding aloud. He says they passed around a fragment of bone, blackened and oily. They told him it was a relic from the original hollow, proof the chain could stretch through fiber optics and data streams. They called it the pivot to flesh, meaning you Your body, your mind, your fear are the new offering. They don't need catacombs when they have screens. They don't need cellars when your phone's microphone is always listening. They don't need your blood on stones when they can siphon your will, drip by drip, until you're nothing but a vessel on autopilot. The perfect modern sacrifice. You want proof? Look around. Have you felt it? That numbness when the news flickers, and the same names rise and fall like bodies in a swamp. Another scandal. Another bankruptcy. Another story that sinks without a splash. And behind it all, a quiet transfer of power, from one trust to another, one name to the next. The Hollow's genius is its simplicity. It doesn't care who holds the chain, so long as the chain holds you. The old rituals bled people dry in cellars. The new ones bleed you in daylight, disguised as convenience, progress, safety. You're more obedient now than any cultist in Deadwater Hollow, and if you think you're immune, you're exactly the vessel they want. Here's a question the Blackwoods pray you'll never ask. What if the Hollow isn't a place at all? What if it's a pattern in your brain? A dark fold in your thoughts where fear feeds fear until you kneel without chains? Nathaniel called it a circle of stones. Silas called it the chain. Eleanor called it the circle of renewal. But it's all the same shape, a loop that closes around your throat the moment you doubt yourself. They don't bind you by force. They bind you by asking, who are you to resist? And you answer, no one. That answer is your offering. But there's another answer, the one they dread, the one that breaks the circle like a hammer to old bone. I am someone. You, right now. This story worming through your ears, dripping into your spine. It's poison to the Hollow, because it reminds you that every chain is handmade. Every circle needs hands to stay closed. What happens when the hands open? When the chain finds nothing to shackle? When the stone circle cracks because no one kneels inside it? That's what they fear when you whisper, I break the chain. That's why I told you to write it twice. Not for me, but for you. Because repetition is a ritual too. But this time, the ritual sets you free. Deep in the Hollow's archives, the real ones, hidden behind layers of dead trusts and coded files, is a final letter from Eleanor Blackwood. Typed on a German typewriter in 1997, marked eyes only. It reads like a confession, a warning, a dare. She writes, the chain endures as long as we stay hidden. The moment the world believes, the chain dissolves. Our power is your disbelief. She knew. They all know. That's why this story, right now, is more dangerous than fire. Because once enough people believe, the ritual shatters under its own weight. Secrets are stones. Speak them, and they sink. Keep them, and they float forever. Bloated with your silent, one night, I dreamt I stood in Deadwater Hollow, knee-deep in black water. The trees leaned in, listening. In the circle of stones, every ancestor who fed the Hollow stood watching me, mouths sewn shut with gold wire. Nathaniel, Silas, Eleanor, Lawrence, even Peter the traitor, his eyes wide and wet with truth. And behind them, something larger, the shape that hums beneath your cities, your schools, your banks. I asked it one question. What happens when the chain breaks? It grinned. A grin made of roots and rot and your mortgage payment. Then it answered, you find all, but you were always free. If that sounds mad, good. Madness is the first taste of freedom. The Blackwoods called it blasphemy, heresy, rebellion. But you know what it really is? Memory. You're remembering what they buried. That no oath, no ritual, no ledger of ancient debts can bind a man who remembers he is alive. Alive means unfinished. Alive means untamed. Alive means no circle can hold you unless you choose to kneel. So stand up. Feel your spine like a column of iron. Feel the chains slip off like rotted silk. The hollow wails when you do. Listen. That sound is victory. If this were just myth, they wouldn't care. But they do. They always have. That's why Peter died on the highway. Why Clara Munro's files were buried. Why the cellars under Deadwater Hollow still hum with power. Because they know stories like this infect your sleep. They become fire in your belly. They become questions you can't unsay. And questions are the enemy of the chain. Ask enough questions, and the ritual eats itself. So here's one more. Who benefits when you forget? Who profits when you hush your voice? Who signs the checks when you swallow your questions and go back to your desk, your screen, your numb routine? Trace the money. Trace the silence. Follow the line and you'll find the same stones, the same spiral, the same whisper. The hollow feeds. But it doesn't have to. Not if you break the circle, pass the torch, refuse to kneel. That's the final ritual. The only one that matters. They won't like this. If this channel vanishes, you'll know why. If this video goes dark, you'll know who flipped the switch. But it doesn't matter. Because the story is in you now. It's in your tongue, your fingertips, your eyes, when you look at another man and say, "Did you know?" The chain is weakest when you speak face to face. Look them in the eye. Let them feel your conviction. Let them hear the hollow tremor. Look behind your teeth. One story at a time, we unbind ourselves. They'll say this is paranoia. They'll say no family could hold so much sway across centuries. That Deadwater Hollow is just swamp and rot and ghost stories. They'll roll their eyes when you talk about stone circles and blood oaths and the humming beneath the floor. But watch their faces when you name the ones in the shadows. The donors who fund both sides of every vote. The consultants who write your laws in secret. The syndicates who torch the past so they can sell you the ashes. They look bored, but their hands twitch when you say Blackwood. They look calm, but their pupils shrink when you whisper, "The hollow feeds." Even liars flinch when the truth stirs. The trick is always the same. Ridicule the truth until it drowns in noise. Every generation the chain needs new links, new myths to bury the last. So they say the Blackwoods died out, that the hollow is just folklore, a spooky story for tourists and teens with flashlights. Meanwhile, the ledgers pass from father to son, mother to daughter, hidden behind shell companies and discreet foundations. The rituals get new names: think tanks, policy labs, non-profits. You think you're giving charity, you're feeding the chain. But once you know its appetite, you can starve it. You can look at the velvet invitation and say, "No," and in that refusal, the circle cracks. A man in Pennsylvania once mailed me a box. No note, no return address. Inside, a brass key, cold and corroded, and a slip of paper with 3 words: basement, hollow, mercy. I took that key to Deadwater Hollow's last standing farmhouse, a place the county calls condemned, but the circle calls the nursery. I slipped the key into the lock beneath the stairs. Inside, a stone slab, black with candle soot. Scratch marks in the shape of spirals. And on the wall, carved by a desperate hand, "Mercy is memory." I took nothing. I locked the door. The hollow feeds on Seku. Rets hoarded. Better to leave it open and let the wind find it. Years ago, they mocked Peter Blackwood's final letter, called it the mad ravings of a drunk traitor. But read carefully and you'll see the hidden truth. He knew the hollow's secret weakness. It cannot thrive in the open. He wrote, "The chain unravels when the lowliest voice repeats what the mighty hide." He died in a shallow grave for that sentence. You and I stand over his bones now, repeating him. Every word you say aloud, every story you pass on, is a hammer blow on the last stones of Deadwater Hollow. Keep swinging. They bribed reporters. They threatened publishers. They burned archives. But the Hollow can't erase everything. Sometimes it fails. Like the old engineer who rebuilt the Hollow's hydro tunnels in the 1950s. He told his grandson the pipes weren't just for water. They carried something older, something willing. When the boy grew up, he drilled through the tunnel wall out of spite, found bones wrapped in oilskin, ledger pages sealed in wax. He mailed copies to anyone who'd listen. The chain silenced him, but the leaks spread. Proof that the Hollow's strongest weapon is your silence. Break it, and the black water floods daylight. You see, the Hollow never feared crusaders with torches. It fears the patient traitors, the ones who chip away from within. Clara Monroe, Peter Blackwood, Roy Delaney, the engineer's grandson, men and women who whispered the secret into ears that would listen. You are them now. The chain's worst nightmare is not one big rebellion. It's 10,000 small ones. Quiet men at kitchen tables, women who pass the ledger pages folded in children's books, lovers who whisper in the dark. The chain ends with us. That's the war they can't win. If you stand on Deadwater's marsh at dawn, you might hear it, a low hum under the bullfrogs in the wind. Some say it's gas seeping from the peat. Some say it's the sound of a buried turbine still spinning. But I know what it is. It's the memory of the stones calling to each other, like teeth grinding. They hate the sun. They hate your voice. They want you blind and quiet. So speak louder. Make the stones crack with your laughter. Make the Hollow hum like an empty stomach. It fears starvation more than it fears your rage. Nathaniel Blackwood believed the chain would last forever because men fear freedom more than servitude. He wasn't wrong, but he was only half right. Men fear freedom when they stand alone, but stand together, even 2, 3, 4, and fear shrivels like wet parchment over flame. That's why you must never carry this story alone. Pass it to another man, a brother, a son, a stranger in a bar who buys you a whiskey and says, "Ever hear about the Hollow?" You smile. You nod. You say, "Let me tell you something they don't want you to know." Every record says the last Blackwood heir died in 1971. A hunting accident. But the coroner's notes hint at something else. The body was found kneeling in a clearing near Deadwater's edge. Spine bent backward, mouth stuffed with river stones, eyes gouged out but no blood trail. Ritual, not accident. The Hollow ties off loose ends with art. That's how it feeds on fear, shows you what happens to traitors. But fear is half a lie. The truth is, that final heir didn't die for nothing. He died because the chain was fraying. He died so you could stand here now and spit on the last stone. You think they won't come for you if you speak this out loud? Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. Doesn't matter. The chain counts on your fear of consequences to seal your lips. Break that fear, and the chain rusts. What can they really do? Cancel you? Delete your channel? Freeze your account? Good. Let them. It proves the Hollow still trembles at daylight. It proves the chain is brittle. Laugh when they push back. Shout louder when they hush you. The louder you speak, the weaker they become. Some ask, why not torch the Hollow outright? Burn Deadwater to the soil. Blow up the catacombs. Salt the stones. Tempting but pointless. Because the Hollow isn't a place. It's a pattern. You can torch the soil, but not the secret. You can drown the catacombs, but not the whispers. The only true fire is memory. The only true bomb is your mouth. Stories survive fire. Secrets rot when told. So tell them. Every night. Every dawn. Until the hollow is nothing but an old fear, half remembered by old men who die wondering, how did the chain break? I told you, the hollow is cunning. It will adapt. It will wear new masks. Tomorrow it might call itself something softer. A charity, a fund, a think tank for sustainable governance. The stones might sink back into the swamp, waiting for your grandchildren to forget. So swear to me now. Swear to yourself. They won't. Swear that when the hollow lifts its head again, your blood will remember. Your bones will remember. Your sons and daughters will know the name, Deadwater Hollow, and they will say, we do not kneel. There's an old phrase carved in the last ledger. The chain is forever, so long as the mind forgets. What if you tattoo it backwards across your ribs? What if you carve it on the inside of your skull, so long as the mind remembers? Every man who remembers weakens the circle. Every whisper, every rumor, every drunken bar story about the Blackwoods and the Catacombs and the ledger pages. Another stone splits in half. That's the real ritual. Repetition, retelling, remembering.